Every single eukaryotic cell has mitochondria within it. Now, the reason for this is because mitochondria is a site of aerobic respiration and it's used to synthesize ATP. Now, you have to be aware of where each process of respiration takes place within it. However, there's one that's glycolysis, and glycolysis is the first stage of aerobic respiration. So, glycolysis, it does not take place within the mitochondria, it takes place in the cytoplasm, whereas the other three, so Link's reaction, Krebs cycle, and oxidative phosphorylation, they occur within the mitochondria. So glycolysis occurs in the cytoplasm. Okay, let's get on with the actual structure itself. So let's start off with the membranes. You have the outer membrane, and you have the inner membrane. The outer membrane is permeable to several small molecules, and the inner membrane is the site of the electron transport chain. So in the inner membrane, you have ATP synthase enzymes and you have the electron transport proteins. So that's why we say it's a site of electron transport, the site of the electron transport chain and oxidative phosphorylation. Within the outer and inner membrane, you have the intermembrane space. So this is the intermembrane space over here. Now, the intermembrane space is essential for oxidative phosphorylation to occur. It has a low pH, which means it has a high number of H plus ions. So when you have a low pH, you have a lot of H plus. When you have a high pH, you have a lot of OH minus. So the intermembrane space has a high number of H plus ions, okay? So protons. And this creates a concentration gradient which is needed for H plus to diffuse back into the inner membrane, and that causes the synthesis of ATP through the protein. We'll get onto that when you look at oxidative phosphorylation, but this is essentially what it does. So it has a lot of H plus and it forms a concentration gradient which is essential for the ATP synthesis. You have the matrix, which is like the cytoplasm, but we don't call it the cytoplasm, we call it the matrix. So the matrix. Now, the matrix, it's just basically an aqueous solution, which is just in the mitochondria. The matrix contains the ribosomes, the mitochondrial DNA, and it also contains enzymes, which are just essential for the actual mitochondria to function. So we'll get on to this bit here. So this is the mitochondrial DNA, which is just DNA. And here you have the ribosomes, which again are the sites of protein synthesis. Okay, now here on the inner membrane, you have ATP synthase. ATP synthase. These may be called stalked particles. Depends on what you prefer, but I'm going to call them ATP synthase because it's easier to understand. So they're just on the inner membrane and they synthesize ATP. So synthesizing, and you're synthesizing ATP. So it's involved in oxidative phosphorylation. So let's get on to where I've forgotten one more thing. These folds are known as cristae. I think I'm saying it right, but they're known as cristae, and what they do is they provide a large surface area. They provide a large surface area because they can hold electron transport chain proteins and ATP synthase proteins. They can hold a lot of them, which means that you are able to synthesize a lot more ATP. Now let's get on to the processes of aerobic respiration. So, as mentioned, the ATP synthase and the inner membrane and the intermembrane space are all involved in oxidative phosphorylation. So oxidative phosphorylation. Can't fit it on there. I'm just going to write OP for short. Okay. The matrix is where you have two other processes occurring. So aerobic respiration has 4 stages. The glycolysis stage, which is first, it occurs in the cytoplasm. Oxidative phosphorylation occurs on an inner membrane and ATP synthase and the intermembrane space. So the ATP synthase is essentially on the inner membrane. So essentially, oxidative phosphorylation occurs between the inner membrane and the intermembrane space. That's it. And the matrix, but we'll get onto that in another video. So the matrix, main site of Link's reaction and Krebs cycle. And that's essentially it. So you have your outer membrane, your inner membrane, and the intermembrane space. Oxidative phosphorylation occurs so ATP synthase is on the inner membrane. You have cristae, which provide a large surface area, and they can hold a lot more electron transport chain proteins and more ATP synthases, so more synthesis of ATP occurs. You have the mitochondrial DNA, and you have ribosomes over here. Which, the function of DNA provides genetic information, and ribosomes, which is protein synthesis. The matrix is where Link's reaction occurs and Krebs cycle. It's where the ribosomes are, the mitochondrial DNA, and the enzymes. And that's just an aqueous solution where all of these are contained within. The intermembrane has a high number of protons, which creates that gradient needed for oxidative phosphorylation.